Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. For the next 60 minutes, we are going to help you to understand how to plan and prepare to defend yourself and your family inside your home. Now, the topics that will be discussed here are why the current pandemic has increased the need for vigilance at home. We're going to give you some background info and data on home invasions and burglaries and etc., stuff like that. We're also going to talk about how to conduct a home defense evaluation and what makes up a home defense plan. And we're going to wrap it up with some other considerations. Now, I would like to welcome a couple of my favorite people to today's discussion panel. I'd like to welcome Beth Alcazar. Beth is a USCCA senior training counselor and the author of Women's Handgun and Self-Defense Fundamentals. Beth, thanks for being here with us.
Thanks so much, Steve.
And next, I would like to introduce the author of the USCCA's Concealed Carry and Home Defense Fundamentals, also Emergency First Aid Fundamentals, and Countering the Mass Shooter Threat, Michael Martin. Michael also happens to be, hold on a second, Michael, because you got more to your bio. You also happen to be a firefighter and a paramedic. And this is definitely going to figure into our conversation and discussion today. So, Michael, thanks for joining us, and how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. How you doing, Beth?
Great, thank you.
Now, one more welcome is going to be to all of you, all of the members and all the other people that are not yet members of the USCCA. Thank you for joining us. Okay, now what I want to tell you about a little bit is before we start, I would like to make you aware of the limited offers that we have especially for you tonight. They are limited, so I want you to give plenty of notice. I want to give you plenty of notice so that you can take advantage of these offers. For all of our valued members, we're partnered with Simply Safe Home Security Systems. So just go to uscca.com and log in. You'll get more details on this later in the show. So there's something out there for you with Simply Safe. Now, for those of you who are non-members, join now, and you will receive a Simply Safe Home Security System, which is valued at $363. You'll get that for free with your new USCCA membership. So let's get started. Beth and Michael, let's talk about what's changed so far. Why do you guys believe that the current pandemic has increased the need for vigilance at home and for developing a home defense plan? Michael, let's get you going first.
Sure, right. Thanks, Steve. So you're right. A lot has changed in the last few weeks. So I guess the conversations we've had among each other and our friends and family, we realized that there's a fair bit of concern and even fear that the average citizen is dealing with. Financial fears, lots of people are out of work, health fears with the pandemic itself, and of course, the concern that maybe government services won't be able to provide an immediate fix to these problems. So I'm not just talking about a fix that we might get from the federal government financially or a fix we might get from the CDC on the pandemic itself. I see a lot of people having concerns about their local governments and whether their local public safety departments are capable of dealing with that local situation. So for example, in my agencies, police themselves are now in a situation where they need to keep their staff safe. So in some cases, contact with low-level offenders might be limited, and as a result, misdemeanor crimes can be ignored. So we're also seeing low-level offenders being released from prisons in California and New York in an attempt to keep them safe as the pandemic starts to make its way into the prison population. So you'd like to think all of those prisoners getting out early have been reformed, but that's probably a bit optimistic. And police themselves are even getting sick. So Beth and Steve, when I talked to you guys 2 days ago about this, I told you that the New York City Police Department had lost 1,600 officers out on sick leave. Guess what that number was yesterday? So 2 days ago, it was 1,600.
What do you think, Beth?
3,000 maybe?
Yeah, I was
Great
thinking
guess,
maybe,
Beth.
I was thinking double that, 3,000,
So
3,500.
it's double that. It's 6,498 as of yesterday. So the number's certainly going to be bigger today. And that's 1 out of 6 officers, or almost 20% of the entire force. And that's when 911 calls are hitting records. And of course, Beth, you and I have talked about this. We're also seeing many products becoming scarce. And that can lead to unreasonable behavior by previously reasonable people. So Beth, you and I talked about the craziness of videos of people fighting over toilet paper.
Yes, of all things, it's toilet paper. I mean, I get it. People need toilet paper, but you wouldn't think that that would be the thing that we're really having a shortage of. And it's a critical shortage. There are folks posting all over the United States about empty shelves right now.
Yeah. hand
Yep.
sanitizers. What else is out there? Masks, the respiratory
Yep.
masks. I mean, you
Right.
name it. There's just not enough of them anymore. Non-perishable foods. And you go to the store right now, and what are you seeing? You're seeing people have little arguments that have the potential into growing into bigger ones, don't they?
Yep.
Right.
Cans
And
of
what seems
food,
to be
bags
happening
of rice. Yep.
Yeah, and what seems to be happening with so many people is that whether you need it or not, if you see that the product is being scooped up, you have a tendency to also want to purchase these things. So, real or imagined, patience is really wearing thin right now, and the media is kind of helping to build up this level of anxiety and fear, and that's very unfortunate. But people are acting upon rumors, and
Right.
it's happening everywhere.
I'm a pretty new guy to Facebook, and what's amazed me is the number of people who will post what they claim is absolute fact when I know that it's
Yeah.
bunk. But people start to react to that, and you'll get at least one or two people giving it a thumbs up that they agree with it.
Yeah,
Yep.
and if you hear something enough, you have a tendency. The human nature is to start to believe things that you see and hear
Right.
all
That's
the
right.
time, right? So, let's move into the background information, guys.
Yep. So we're just talking about a bunch of rumors and all the way people make decisions based on fear and the concerns they have. But I'm a real data-driven guy, so I like looking at numbers and trying to determine, can we find patterns in those numbers? And if we find patterns, we make decisions. So Steve, you'd asked the question about how big is this problem of home invasions, and do we have a real concern even prior to the epidemic? So where I like to go for crime data is what's called the Uniform Crime Report. It's a report that's created annually by the FBI. So the most recent data they've got is from 2018. So Joe, I'm going to call on you. Can I have you pull up chart number 1? That shows 2018 data for burglaries and breaking and entering. So as you'll see on this chart, there were more than 424,000 crimes of burglary or breaking and entering in 2018. Now, I'll add that the FBI doesn't specify whether those were cold burglaries, meaning no one was home, or a hot burglary, meaning someone was at home, or what we usually call a home invasion. Now, of course, the pandemic isn't going to reduce the number of burglaries, of course. In fact, it might even increase them, because the average petty criminal offender might have a day job. That guy's now trapped at home like the rest of us, wondering where his next rent check's going to come from. And he might think his rent check's going to come from stealing a few things from my house, or his next roll of toilet paper might come from my house.
Michael, that's a really interesting point, because it's not just the normal, average, everyday people who are stuck at home. It very well could be
Right.
those who are maybe prone to this petty
Criminals are
theft.
stuck at home too.
Yeah, and that's really what the main thing is, though, that's different about all of this. Whatever the statistics are saying, whether there's a home invasion or a burglary, we're all sitting at home now, and that changes
Right.
things drastically.
So that number is not going to change, and let's say it doesn't even go up. The big change now, as you said, Beth, we're now at home, so hot
Yeah.
burglaries are more likely to occur than they were just a month ago.
Yeah. You know what? Bad people are usually bad by nature, you guys. But now they're actually motivated to
Right.
act on those impulses, and they're self-justified because they feel like they
And
have to be in survival mode.
they may act on those rumors that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Beth, how exactly are burglars or people that are entering people's homes, how are they getting into these homes?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and some of our folks might know this from the concealed carry home defense classes that we teach. But Joe, if you could bring up image 2, lo and behold, this is where most criminals are entering the home. It's not what you think, people. It's not the back door. It's not the garage. It's literally the front door. So even though that might be surprising to a lot of people, I've seen it happen. 3-4 years ago, about 5 or 6 houses away, there was a white van stationed in front of a home. And of course, driving by, a lot of folks thought, well, maybe they have a service worker there, or maybe someone's repairing something or delivering something. That wasn't the case. That group of people basically broke into that person's home through the front door. Granted, they were not there, but it just kind of goes to prove that it's not necessarily what you see in the movies or on TV. In fact, chart number 3, Joe, if you could show that right now, this is kind of the breakdown that we're getting from FBI statistics. We're showing about 34% of the time it's a good swift kick to that front door, just as we mentioned. The rest of the time, here's where your back door comes into place, where 22% of those burglaries and break-ins were happening through that entry point back door, screen door, something along those lines. But then interestingly enough, hey, be careful of those windows, those first floor windows, because we're seeing statistics showing that that was used about 23% of the time. So go around, lock those doors, check those windows.
Yeah, and Beth, you just said it right there. Lock the doors. A lot of us are very
Yeah.
trusting. We know our neighbors, and we don't lock our doors. And you know what? Burglars and home invaders, they don't need to pick a lock if the door is open. So lock the
Right.
door.
Right. So in the fire service, we call that try before you pry. And it's always kind of a joke that if a firefighter gets ready to breach a door and the other firefighter reaches over and turns the knob and the door opens, we all kind of kid each other. And I'd like to think that criminals at least have that amount of intelligence as well. So locking the
Oh,
door,
yeah.
double bolting it, we'll talk about that a bit further, but that's one way to keep them out.
Yeah, so since this pandemic has hit, Beth and Michael, what are the major changes that have been caused as a result of it?
I really have kind of narrowed this down to the three major changes that I think we're all seeing right now. And the first one, of course, is the financial situation. There's been a lot of either job losses or businesses closing, or maybe they're kind of curtailing their hours right now. So people are really concerned because they might not have enough reserves or something put away for those rainy days, as they say. The second thing, as we already talked about, is that panic buying, where people are purchasing supplies that they need, stockpiling the supplies, but perhaps maybe buying things they didn't need to. So there's very limited supplies across the board. And then finally, there's just with the restrictions that we now have on movement, some folks have the stay at home, the safer at home. Some folks maybe even have curfews put into place. There could be some civil unrest. There could be really, people with cabin fever. I know my household is definitely going through that right now. So think about it, guys. We are running low on money, food, and patience. And to me, that could very well be a perfect storm for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree. In fact, Beth, one of the phrases that you said the other day was, "Now's not the time to panic. It's time to use precaution, planning,
Yep.
and preparation." I love the three P's. Most people aren't doing that. Most people are panicking at this point, and that's what
Yeah.
goes into their planning and their assumptions. So one of the other things we had talked about the other day was another surge of purchases that have been occurring, and that's been with firearms and ammunition. So there are a large
Right.
number of first-time gun owners since the middle of March. So that's not a surprise when people feel unsafe and when they especially feel that maybe their government can't protect them in all situations. People do go out and seek to purchase a firearm. So it's happening now. It happened before and during Hurricane Katrina. What was interesting about the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina was that the buying of firearms wasn't just localized, it was all across the US. That was an extremely localized event, yet we saw gun purchases skyrocket through the roof all across the United States for months after that. And the same thing's happening now. In fact, Joe, I'll have you bring up chart number 4. This shows us March's numbers that the FBI just reported. So in March, there was a record number of background NICS checks, they're called, 3.7 million gun purchases for background checks that occurred during that month, which is a 41% jump up from a year ago. Now, that's very likely going to go for months. People just have this fear and this concern that in some cases, they might be responsible not only for clothing and feeding their family, but for protecting them as well. So personally, I think this is happening because people are kind of getting the fact that if social order breaks down, the cavalry's not suddenly going to ride over the hill with an emergency roll of toilet paper because, as we see in New York City, the cavalry themselves might be laid up in bed with the pandemic.
Yeah. Michael, Beth talked earlier about panic buying and how fear can be contagious. Let's take that to the next level. What do you believe might lead to a local or national riot or even looting?
So far, we've seen some very localized events occurring where, it makes it to the national news or on Facebook where someone fights over a roll of toilet paper. But we've had some examples in the past, and I'll refer back to Katrina again, where there were some looting. There was some looting occurring. There were some riots going on, and that occurred because of that fear. I remember seeing images of people wading through floodwaters carrying TV sets just after the hurricane hit. Now, obviously, those guys were stealing. They weren't buying because of the need. In fact, I pulled a quote out from August 30th, 2005 from NBC News. The quote was, "Looting on Tuesday took place in full view of police and National Guard troops." That just showed that they were concerned about their own safety and they weren't about to disrupt people walking away with TV sets and so on. But 10 years later, we've got a little bit of a different perspective on what was happening in many cases when stores were being broken into. Now, stealing TV sets is one thing, stealing baby formula is another. And I love a quote from the Lieutenant General who was in charge of the National Guardsmen in the aftermath, a gentleman named Lieutenant General Russell Honore. So he coordinated about 300 National Guardsmen, I think, that were sent in to help keep order. So 10 years after the event, he made a fairly perceptive quote. And Joe, I'll have you pull up that quote. It's on image 5. The quote was, "People confuse looting with people going into survival mode. It'll happen to you and I if we were just as isolated." Now, we're feeling very isolated right now because we're all in our own homes. If we begin feeling more isolated from our government and especially from public safety, the same thing might happen.
Yeah, and let me remind everybody again, don't panic. When you see National Guardsmen, they're there to help you. They're not there to take away from you. So treat them with respect.
Right. And they are local people. They are your neighbors, they're your friends, they're your family, they might be your coworkers. So these are guys who are not going to take orders to do something illegal or to violate your constitutional rights.
Right.
You know, and all of this, Michael, we were talking not too long ago about that book, 1 Second After. And granted, the scenario in the book is based off of, completely different circumstances. But the main characters in this book are put into kind of a similar situation where supplies are low, where panic kind of ensues, and you've got this crowd think kind of thing going on where, people are taking what they need for themselves. But here you have an honorable, upstanding citizen, basically a law-abiding guy. The main character is a really good person, but he finds himself under an interesting situation. His daughter has diabetes, and at one point he takes more than his share, if you will, of insulin so that he can stockpile for her.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And when I read that, I understood it. I had to ask myself, what would I do that crosses the legal or ethical line for my family? And one of the things that really stood out to me in that book was when transit shut down, when commerce shut down, people realized the stores had at most 2 to 3 days of products, and that's with normal buying. With panic buying, it's gone in hours. And I don't think that'll happen now, but if our truckers suddenly start to develop symptoms of the pandemic, we have to assume that at some point resupplying may shut down if this continues. So that book was a real good lesson for me when it came to preparing for survival and home protection.
And I think it's a great place for us to talk a little bit about how important it is to set our minds to be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I'm gonna reach out to everybody out here. Stop hoarding. Don't start hoarding. Start sharing, right? So let's go into the next topic right now. So we're going to talk about how to conduct a home defense evaluation. Okay, some of the questions that we want to have answered. We're going to look at evaluating the exterior of your home, evaluating the interior of the home, discovering and finding weaknesses, and then learning how to correct any deficiencies in the doors, the windows, the alarm systems, etc. So Michael, why don't you get us going here?
Yep. In fact, I like how you refer to this as a home inspection checklist. If I talk to a person who had never thought about home protection before, and I said, what should we have on our list when it comes to preparing for home protection? I think the average person is going to think, well, you're talking about a gun, right? And of course, we're going to talk about home defense firearms, but the more important step is to make sure your home is better protected. Just like when we talk to concealed carry permit holders about not getting into situations out on the street that can lead you to a situation that you'd rather have avoided, we want to do the same thing in the house. So a home inspection is a natural place to start when we think about how to protect your home from a burglar or home invader. So in the book, Concealed Carry and Home Defense Fundamentals, the book and course, we spend time running through a very comprehensive home inspection checklist. So Joe, I'm going to have you pull up checklist number 6, image 6. That's got a segment of that checklist, and we'll talk about some of the highlights. And while that list is coming up, Steve, I want to refer to a couple things you talked about inspecting the home outside. That's actually where I tell people to start. Do a 360-degree inspection all the way around the house and look for weaknesses. Beth, you and I have talked about one of the biggest weaknesses is the lack of lights. If a burglar is looking at 3 houses down the street and 1 is dark and 2 have lights, which one do you think he's going to hit? So we want to make sure that the house looks secure, shrubs are cleared away from the house, so windows are not hidden, and lights are turned on. You might spend a little more on electricity, but keep those lights on. So on the checklist that we're going to look at now, we're going to talk about the doors, because as Beth said, that's the first couple of places that people make access. So of course, it's natural to focus on the strength of the front door, but criminals will focus on whichever door is the weakness. So we want to look at the quality and strength of the front, back, side, and interior garage doors. So Steve and Beth, a day or two ago, I gave a story about how I kicked down a front door in one of my jobs as a firefighter. So I did what's called the donkey kick. I faced the door backwards and gave it about 2 or 3 kicks with the back of my foot, and that knocked that door down so I could make entry. Last night, a couple of my team members had to breach a door, and they checked the front door, and that one was actually pretty secure with a second deadbolt. But the back door had a simple lock on it, and with a simple tool, they had that door open in about 30 seconds. So that's inspection has to look at all of the doors. One of the first questions we want to ask is, like the question we asked last night, does your door have a deadbolt, a chain lock, or a throw over lock, or does it have the single lock on the main handle? So a good throw over lock is the kind of thing you see at a hotel. That's a very easy thing to add, or adding another deadbolt's a good idea. One of the other questions I ask people is, can you see out the front door to see who's at the door without opening the door? Now, I've got solid core doors, so there's no glass in it, so I've added a little peep sight. But Steve, I know you've got glass on your front door, so when you approach the door, they're going to see you as you see them. But you've got kind of a built-in security system at your house, don't you?
Well, yeah. If you don't have a solid core door with a peephole, you got windows. That's it's easy access, unless, of course, you're prepared for that. And now, in my particular case, I am. I have 2 dogs, 2 canine companions that love the daylights out of myself and my wife, and they will do anything that they can to make sure that we're safe. So they start. Well, they start by greeting our visitors with, they bark at them, and that alerts us to knowing that somebody's there. And then they run to the door where our visitors are standing, and they let them know that they can't come in unless we invite them in. So one of those
like
dogs, one of them is a big
just like the average
95-pound
criminal
lab.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just like the average criminal doesn't want to go to a house that's well lit up, that criminal's not going to look at your dogs and think, I can probably beat these dogs. He's going to move on down the block. And I think, Beth, you've got a similarly sized dog, don't you?
Yes, I do. I have a huge 120-pound German Shepherd, but Steve, we have some windows in that area. But what I've done to just make sure that I have some access to what's going on outside is I've got some reflective surfaces actually strategically placed up where I can actually stand in one room and look at the reflection and see that front door. So as Sonny is barking his head off or trying to keep people away, I can glimpse and see, is this someone delivering a package? Is there, someone trying to sell Girl Scout cookies or whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
And now my dog is about this big, but he'll bark his head off. So he's a little furry alarm system as well. A criminal is going to think, well, this dog's not going to hurt me, but the criminal will know this dog just woke up the homeowner, so I'm gonna go down the street and find an easier house. So let's talk about one more thing on the front door. So Steve and Beth, if I told you that I had a door product that could increase the strength of your door by about 10 times, how much do you think that'd cost? So 10 times the strength.
10 times.
Oh, it'd be expensive, right?
The cost of the door, right?
Well, your last guess was a little off. Well, it's going to
hundreds of dollars.
It's going to cost about 60 cents. So this is a strike plate that I pulled off of one of my interior doors. I didn't want to take it off the front door or the back door. So the strike plate is what the bolt goes into. After this video, I suggest everybody go to your front door, back door, garage door, and take the screws out of your strike plate. So on my interior door, I pulled out the screw. It's about 1/2 inch long. That's enough to hold the plate into place, but it's not enough to go into the studs that are holding the door up. So by buying 2 30-cent screws that are about 3 inches or 3.5 inches long, replacing those tiny screws, that's going to increase the force required to breach that door by about 10 times. So 60 cents will increase that force. And Beth, you and I were kind of kidding the other day about when Tim Schmidt and I did an inspection of his house a few years back, and we went up to a strike plate, and I said, Tim, how long do you think those screws are? And we had talked about how long they should be, and he said, well, I assume they're 3 or 4 inches long. And I unscrewed it, and sure enough, it was about 1/2 inch long. So Tim, immediately went out and got longer screws to fix that door and better protect the house.
And what's funny about that, Michael? My husband and I actually had that DVD before we knew any of you guys, and we were watching that in our own home. And as soon as that part came up, we're like, oh my gosh, let's go check right now. And sure enough, we had these tiny little wimpy screws that did diddly squat to keep anybody
Right.
safe. And yeah, we made the big investment of 60 cents as well that day and made sure that we had a much stronger support system for that front door.
60 cents well spent. So
Well spent.
we're not going to cover the entirety of the checklist, but I did want to cover those highlights. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at the full home inspection checklist in concealed carry and home defense fundamentals. And even if it encourages you to modify just one or two things in the house, those one or two things could be the difference between being an easy target and having a potential burglar move further down the street.
Yeah. So you know what? Maybe we should talk about alarms now. Aside from the four-legged kind of home alarm, which is what I actually prefer, but aside from the four-legged alarm, Michael, can you comment on the electronic kind?
Yep. So I've done some research, a little bit of writing on this. Of course, millions of Americans have home alarm systems. One of the interesting places to find data about them are insurance companies, because insurance companies may give you a break on your home insurance if you have an alarm. But what insurance companies have discovered is that although millions of Americans have alarm, very few people are setting it. So Joe, I'll have you pull up chart number 7. I think that shows our home alarm data. So as you can see on this chart, collectively about 60 to 80% of homeowners who have security systems never set them. So it's a crazy number. 53% don't set them because of pets, and they're concerned that pets will set the alarm off. And another 21% don't set them because of concerns their kids will set them off. Now, of course, most modern alarms are designed not to go off when pets are running around the house. And if kids are home, well, you use a different mode. There's a home mode and there's a away mode. And people kind of forget the fact that these systems can be set that way.
And I'm so glad you just mentioned those different modes. As simple as that seems, a lot of people just don't think about it. We like to think we're so safe and comfortable in our own homes. And my parents recently, I guess a couple years back, got their alarm system. I was super proud, and my mom was super proud to say, "Yep, we set it every time we leave the house." And I thought,
Yeah.
wait a minute,
Every time they leave the house.
Yeah, I was like, are you setting it when you're there? Because you have to consider, Mom, Dad, what's more important, your stuff or your lives? So good thing
Right.
to mention those modes. You have to set the mode when you're home, because that's the most important thing to protect your family while they're there.
And Beth, I'd add, I think a lot of people might be concerned that if they're home and they set the alarm, what happens if they forget and they open that front door,
Oh, yeah.
or maybe they go into
Right.
an area that's got a motion detector that goes off? Well, what a lot of these systems do is they call an alarm company. The alarm company has two calls that go out. One call that goes out to the public safety department where the person lives, and the other call goes to the individual to figure out, are they actually okay? So
Right.
the police get these calls all the time. They're going to send one squad. That squad's going to go routine, meaning not lights and sirens. But if they show up and everything's fine, their response is going to be, have a great day. Now, if your parents
Yeah.
set the alarm off repeatedly, well, then the cops are going to have an issue with that.
Yeah,
But,
that's another
once
story.
or twice a year, or once every couple of years, not a big deal.
Well, let's be fair to our parents and remember that back when they were growing up, home defense and home security was simply flipping the light switch, and putting the porch light on. And now there's a lot more
Right.
tools that are at their disposal to help them to make sure that they're safe at home. Now, it's not just alarm systems these days either. There's a lot of great phone applications, computer applications that are out there. So, Beth, why don't you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they always say, oh, there's an app for that, and technically there is. There's Nest and there's Ring and there's other different things that you can set up, either just the app or something with a video camera. My parents also have Ring, and it's been really, really handy. Not only do you get notifications when somebody is at the front door, but if there's something passing by that front door. And what I thought was really cool is I noticed that they were getting notifications when there had been break-ins in the local area surrounding them. So that was actually
Wow.
very helpful to know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we do have people that live in our neighborhoods that are prone to,
Yeah.
breaking the law once in a while. So if those types of things happen in your neighborhood, it's good to have a heads up on
Good
it,
to
right?
know.
Yep. And I
Right.
guarantee you, criminals know what a Ring camera looks like at the front door. They're not going to walk up to
Oh,
that
yeah.
house. They're going to go someplace else, although they may go to the back door. But if they see a security
That's
camera
true.
there, again, they may go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's too much work for them, and they're by nature kind of lazy. So when we talk about this current pandemic, we know that so many of us are working at home right now, right? Well,
Yeah.
I've heard about things like some of these really cool technological devices that I don't have. Well, I do have one. I don't have Alexa, but I have a thing called Furbo. So anytime my dogs walk in front of the Furbo, it alerts my wife
my
and I
goodness.
on our phone, and then we can hit a button that blows a whistle, and when they look at the Furbo, it throws them a treat. But what we found too is that people can hack into those types of things at home and start to look at what's going on inside your house without you even knowing it.
You know, I think there's a lot of hype and a lot of conspiracy theories out there about this kind of thing. But, you know, I have noticed a lot more people that are being really cautious about these kinds of things. What kind of listening devices do you actually have in your home? It could be on your television. It can be on your laptop, your computer, your phone.
Right.
It would probably be really good to check those things. And I know that for myself, I have cameras on just about every single one of built-in cameras in these laptops. And all you need is some very simple device to kind of slide that closed when you're not using it. Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't need all these extra people listening or watching. Try to go through and, I guess, protect yourself with your electronic devices and those technological devices, right? Yeah.
You know, the companies that build these things are going to release patches if there's security problems, but of course they released the security patch because someone uncovered a problem, right? You know,
because
someone
they had
discovered
a problem.
criminal breaching access. Steve and I realized if a criminal ever accessed your Furbo application, he could feed the dogs while another criminal was in robbing the jewels.
Something to think about.
That's a great device. I love it.
So as we talked about the security systems, I think this is a great opportunity here to address our audience once again. So I know that we have a number of you watching this training event that have not taken advantage of everything that USCCA has to offer yet. We also have a number of you that are already familiar with USCCA, right? So I would like to make all of our viewers aware of 2 limited offers right now, okay? So the first group, the non-members. Join now and you will receive a Simply Safe home security system. That value is $363. So you're going to get that for free with your membership. So just call or go to uscca.com/simplysafe, spelled SIMPLISAFE. So we'll run that offer until 5 p.m. Central Time tomorrow. But the supplies are limited, so do this now. Do it as quickly as you can. Now, the second group, for our members, we also have a great deal on a number of Simply Safe home security systems for you. So just go to uscca.com and log into your dashboard. That will take you to your member dashboard. Again, once you're in that dashboard, you will find a link there, and it's going to give you a deal worth $150. Now, the next topic. What makes up a home defense plan? We'll talk about, Beth and Michael and I will talk a little bit about what goes into these plans, what should a family figure into those plans when they make them, and then how do you train to that plan? Now, Beth, I think it would be a great place for you to start us off.
Yeah, when it comes to a home defense plan, I think something that unfortunately gets overlooked is something that's very simple but very, very necessary. And that is making sure that you don't forget, no matter what is happening, that you dial 911. If you need help, please don't overlook that. I think that we get caught up in the things that could happen. And unfortunately, if we don't make that call, we're losing very valuable time. Michael, I know you, between the 3 of us, know the value of 911. Right. I mean, you live it every day.
I'd agree with that. And not just in the case of somebody kicking down your front door. I teach Boy Scouts a lot, Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. And when we talk about first aid emergencies, and we might be talking about cardiac arrest or someone choking or someone having a diabetic reaction or someone having severe bleeding, as I walk through the steps that they would do to tackle that problem, the answer I'm always looking for is step number 1 is to have someone call 911. And almost inevitably, they forget to do that. And the reason that's so important is every minute you delay having the professionals arrive is another minute or 2 or more that you have to withstand the situation yourself. So whatever plan you come up with, step number 1 should be to get that phone call out to 911. And now I'd add that when you make that call, you don't have to be stuck on the phone with the dispatcher giving them all this information. You literally could dial 911, say home invasion, and set the phone down and deal with the situation as required. My advice is also don't depend upon your alarm company making that call. As I mentioned a minute ago, if your alarm company calls the public safety department, public safety, the police are going to send probably one squad, and they'll do it what we call going routine without lights and sirens. If you make a phone call to 911 and say home invasion, they will pull out the stops. They'll send every squad available. They'll come lights and sirens screaming around the corner of your block, pulling up your front door, and any criminal that's there is probably going to need a change of pants in addition to a lawyer.
You know what? You guys
So
talk
make
about
that call.
Yeah, you talk about the importance of making that call, and here's where when I have an opportunity, I share a very humbling story for myself where I didn't make that call, even though I practice our home invasion plan on a regular basis, and my wife does also. There's always that instance where maybe you're going to skip a step, and it's kind of a funny story, and thankfully it is a funny story because it does have a good ending and a very powerful lesson learned.
You're still here, Steve. So.
I'm still here. But we talked about my dogs earlier, and occasionally my dogs like to wake us up and ask to be let out at night. And one night, the dogs woke my wife up, and she let them out. And I wasn't aware of it. I was sleeping through it, and I was awoken by a very loud scream from my wife. And I went into action. I grabbed my firearm and got my flashlight, and I went out to quickly to see if she was okay. Now, what I didn't do, I didn't holler to her, and I didn't call 911. But what I saw was my wife frozen in fear, pointing to the ground in front of her, and my 65-pound pit bull proudly displaying the possum that she had captured in our backyard. So, all turned out to be okay after that. But again, I say that story because I should have called 911. I didn't. And if I would have, Michael, and they came to discover a possum and nothing else bad happening, is that a bad thing?
It'd be a little embarrassing, but and Steve, I can guarantee you they'd tell that story back at the station. But think about the alternative. If it had been a criminal entering your home, or worse, two criminals entering your home, so you've got Peggy to worry about, yourself to worry about. There's no guarantee that you're going to be successful in a gunfight. And I know what a great gunfighter you are. So getting that call to 911, shouting a question to Peggy, what's happening? Tell me what's happening, and shouting a command to the possum in this case to let them know that you're coming and you're armed. In fact, that kind of makes me think about the stories that I have with home plans when it comes to things like fire or tornado. So, anybody who's got kids in the house has probably practiced a fire escape plan, what to do in case the alarms go off or in case there's smoke in the house. And Beth, for you and I, and well, I guess all of us live in Tornado Alley, so we've all practiced tornado drills in our house. We practice those things, so you kind of figure out the holes. And when it comes to a escape plan in case of fire, we're always thinking about that call to 911. So I suggest doing the exact same thing when it comes to a plan in case of home invasion. What would you do if certain things occurred, like the alarm going off, or hearing your spouse scream, or hearing the front door being kicked down? Now, Beth, you've told me about part of your plan is actually to have a safe room in your house. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, beyond the 911 call, and remember that anybody in the household, even the youngest, can be taught how to do that. So beyond the 911 call, we think about the establishing of a safe room in our home. And that doesn't have to be like this bulletproof steel, amazing underground, technologically superior room that is fully stocked for the next 500 years.
That would be awesome.
Which would be super cool. But that can really just be something that you and your family decides on. Joe, if you bring up slide 8, this kind of gives you this idea of getting together as a family and kind of thinking through your home layout. Think about how many entry and exit points there are to your home, including those first floor windows or windows that could be accessible even with the use of a ladder or a rope ladder from the inside getting out or from the outside getting in, I suppose. Think about also the different rooms in the home that might offer the best security for you in the case of inclement weather or in the case of home invasion. For us, in our family, if we can't escape, if we can't get out, we are going to go to that safe room, that designated area that has some supplies that everybody knows about, that we've practiced, that we know that that is going to be where everyone ends up so that we can kind of figure out the next step, honestly. So go through your home, even with the kids, draw it out if you have to. Look at those different areas that might be the best depending on your layout and your family needs.
Right, Beth, you mentioned your kids. Now my sons are a little older. My youngest is 13 and my oldest is 16. So our plans
Right.
evolve. So over the years, the way we talk about a home invasion plan, it's changed. So for example, my 16-year-old son, I could depend upon him to take certain steps to help defend the home if needed. My 13-year-old, although he'd want to be involved, he knows that his job is to get his phone, make that call to 911, and if he can escape out his window and go to a neighbor's house, he's going to do that. In fact, the younger kids, you might assign one or two things to them. For example, you might say, if you
Yeah.
can get out the front door, run to the neighbor's house, call 911, and then your job is done. Or your job is to go in the safe room, close and lock the door, and stay there, and your job is done. It's as simple as that. So, Beth, you've got a bit wider spread of the age of your kids. How do you calculate them into your plan?
Yeah, luckily I have a 17-year-old. So in a lot of cases, we've been able to depend on her to kind of guide the little ones. Of course, if she's at work, she's not home, then the 10-year-old
Right.
and the 6-year-old have to know what those instructions would be. And they're very simple. They are to get to that safe room and basically lock themselves in and be quiet. And, if they have the ability or the need to call for 911, if that's something that we haven't done, they know that that would be part of their plan at that point.
Yep. And Steve, you and Peggy are empty nesters at this point, although occasionally you'll hear that door open and it's not a burglar, it's a kid coming home for a evening at home,
Yeah.
right? How do you
Well,
guys, how does your plan differ?
Well, I'm smiling as you guys are talking because you're saying that your kids, well, Michael, you said your kids are on the older side. Well, my youngest could be your oldest father. So that dates me a little bit, I'm sure of it. But yeah, when they come home, it's usually because they need something like they want food or they want to use the laundry at our house, that type of thing. And they come home, they understand that we appreciate if they let us know they're coming, especially if it's going to be at off hours. So and everybody in our family have been practicing that home invasion plan since they were little, like your children. So if
Right.
they're home, we just go right into that mode. If they're not home, then Peg and I, we've got it down pat too. So yeah, it's just all about communicating effectively and practicing as a group, right?
Yep. And I guess the way I'd summarize all this topic is that, like a home escape plan in case of fire, a house plan in case of tornado, and we're talking about now a plan in case of home invasion, the first time you practice your plan can't be when the front door is being kicked down. You've got to talk it through and
Right.
practice it.
Yeah. And speaking of front doors being kicked down, how about if we run through a few mental exercises to see how your plans would fit in? So, Joe, I'll have you pull up image 9 here. This will show some of the mental scenarios that we'll talk through. I'll add that all of these mental exercises are contained in our book, Concealed Carry and Home Defense Fundamentals. So here we go. Michael, you're going to start us off. What if we
I got the
hear
first one.
the
All right.
front door? Yep. What if we hear the front door being kicked down or a window being shattered?
So interestingly enough, I would categorize those as two different things. If I heard the front door being kicked down, it's probably going to take a couple kicks, so I know someone's just entered my home. A window being shattered, maybe it's a little bit more of an unknown. I've got a lot of trees around my house. If a tree fell down and broke the window, I might do that differently. But I'm going to handle step number one the same way in both of those. I'm going to have my wife call 911. I'm going to secure the home defense firearm, and I'm going to shout as loud as I can to my sons to find out where they are and let them know that someone's in the house. It may turn out that it's a tree or I guess a possum, right, Steve? But I'm going to shout those commands and I'm going to find out where they are, and I'm going to let someone know I'm wide awake and I know they're in the house. Uh, that might be a surprise to a lot of people. When you watch home break-ins on TV, the homeowners are always very stealthy. They're very quiet. They sneak through the house. They whisper to each other. I've always wondered, why would you do that? You want this guy to know that you're awake and that you know he's in the house. So I bellow out in a command voice to my sons, and those guys are wide awake and they're going to shout back up to me. So if someone is in the house, they're going to probably exit stage left pretty quickly. And if it turns out to be a tree broke the window, well, and then I just shouted at a tree. But those first few steps always happen exactly the same way. And I'm not going to go through the house to go find the bad guy unless one really important thing has occurred. And I'm actually going to wait on that answer till Beth, you and I talk about it in a little bit.
Okay, cool. So, Beth, what if a burglar alarm goes off in the middle of the night?
Oh, I think this is a very, very similar discussion, honestly. I guess if that alarm goes off, it's for most, I guess it's one of two things. It's been the window shatter, or it's been the door actually opened and or close to opening, depending on how your alarm system is set up. So
Right.
that would be a pretty frightening jolt to definitely get us going in our direction of our home plan. And unless I am separate from my kiddos for some reason, all of us are going to try to get to that safe room together. And we've practiced this, we've thought it through. Of course, the 911 has to be called. We have to make sure we've got the phone to do that. And we definitely would secure our home defense gun at some point in time during that movement. I imagine it would be awful and chaotic, and hopefully it's just one of those flukes, like, I don't know, the smoke alarm going off at 2 a.m., which the battery always dies at 2 a.m. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but.
Well,
Yes, I'm very well aware of that. A lot of the calls we get.
there's two cliches here that really play out in these first two scenarios, right? He who hesitates is lost, and
Yeah.
what was the other one that I was thinking about right here? Better safe than sorry, right? So
Right.
those two.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, when you have if somebody announces through a kicked down door, a shattered window, and an alarm, don't hesitate, and just go into action right at the top.
Right.
There.
And in that case, Beth, if you thought the front door may not have been latched securely and it just blew open a little bit and set the alarm
Right.
off, making that phone call to 911 starts the clock ticking. So, in most jurisdictions,
Just
police
in
can be on
case.
scene in 4 to 5 minutes. The clock is ticking. You've only got to wait 4 to 5 minutes. And it may be, 9 or 10 minutes or even longer. But that's far better than an alarm company calling the police and saying, well, we don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
We just know their alarm's going off.
So, Michael,
Yeah.
what if you hear someone in your house? You didn't hear the door get kicked in, you didn't hear glass break, and the alarm didn't go off, but you do hear someone in the house. Maybe they're in your living room.
So that's a bigger step. That's crossed the boundary. So I'll tell you what I won't automatically assume. I won't automatically assume this is a bad guy that I've got to go shoot, because in some cases we've had situations where Alzheimer's patients, people with dementia, have entered a home thinking it's their own and it's the wrong house. Or there's been cases where a drunk college kid has gone into the wrong apartment or the wrong house. Not that that's right, but I want to make a good decision about any use of force that I make. So what I would do, step number one, get that call to 911. Step number two, secure my firearm. And these steps are all occurring within seconds. And step number three is to issue commands in my best command voice that I can to this person to get out of the house. I'd shout to the boys to find out exactly where they were if they weren't around. And then I'll evaluate the situation. If I think this is a person there to do us harm, if a certain line in the sand is crossed, like that person entering into our safe zone, I may have to use deadly force, but otherwise I'm going to keep buttoned up. I'll keep safe. And Steve, as you've said before, I'll be a good witness. If it turns out that I think this is a dementia patient, well, then maybe I'll attempt to help that person. And I still have the authorities come out, but I wouldn't make a bad decision just because of hearing noises in the house.
Well, what if you hear or see
Well,
someone outside of your house?
Well, wait,
If I heard
Steve, do you know
someone's-
that this actually happened to me? This actually happened to me, guys.
Oh, okay.
I actually had someone in my basement and I heard the noises, and I
That's
gotta
right.
tell you, I did all the wrong things, Michael. If we're looking at what you've told us, listen to this. I guess it was my son and I, we were by ourselves that day, and I'm not sure why, but my husband has a business and sometimes his workers will come by and pick up tools or other things. But I heard a noise and I hadn't gotten a text from him saying that anybody was coming by. So as soon as I heard the noise, I kind of went into that uh-oh mode. I went and I locked the door that would allow anybody access to where I happened to be. But then I very stealthily and quietly, like you said not to do, I grabbed my son and head for the safe room and start locking doors and grabbing phones and getting my firearm secured and things like that. But I was like, is it a bad guy or is it someone that's supposed to be here? And I just couldn't bring myself to, I guess, embarrassing myself by calling 911. I wasted who knows how many precious minutes just sitting there listening to try to figure out if this was somebody I knew or somebody I didn't know. And unfortunately, if it had been a bad guy, I wasted a lot of time and could have been in big trouble.
Yeah. I picture this being out of some kind of horror movie where you suddenly see the doorknob starting to rattle on the staircase getting into the main house.
Yeah,
but you're right. Even if you thought this might be someone who's supposed to be in the house, just shouting down the stairs, "Who's in the house?" And if
Yep.
they just answered up, I'm Bob, the contractor, well, then
Right.
things will start to click in your head. But if you don't hear anything, you could shout even louder. But making that call to 911 is pretty simple. Just saying, somebody's in my house. I'm not sure if he's supposed to be here. He might be a contractor, but I'm upstairs. I'm home alone with my kids. Can you send a squad out? They're going to send somebody out. And again, the clock starts ticking. The time that you've got to manage the situation on your own is going to suddenly start
Yep.
going shorter.
All right, so let's go to that outside now. If you hear or see someone outside, and if you think they may be stealing property, Michael, what should you do?
So I've got an answer for this, but Steve, I'm going to push this one back to you because I know you've got a couple things outside your house that you value, probably just after your wife, your dogs, and I'm not sure what else. You've got a couple Harleys out in the garage, right?
Yeah, my iron horses.
So what would you do if you were inside the house and you heard someone in the garage and maybe you saw them messing around with the Harleys? What would your instinct be to do, and what should you do?
Well, my instinct, we both know we all three know what that instinct is, but I'm not even going to speak about it because I don't want to be on record for that. What I would do is I would call 911 and I would become a really good witness. Simple.
I think that's a perfect phrase, is be a good witness. You've got insurance to cover the loss of property. In fact, one of the things we talk about in the class, Concealed Carry and Home Defense Fundamentals, is when we can use force. We can use deadly force under very specific circumstances. Most state laws say that you can use force to defend property, but not deadly force. But there's a gray area in there and some real nuances. For example, Steve, let's say you walked outside the house and you were just holding a shotgun and you said, hey, get away from my Harley. Well, that display of a firearm could be considered a level of force. It's not deadly force yet, but it would be considered force. So that could potentially protect your property. But now let's say the guy turned around and he also had a gun, so you had to use deadly force to protect your life. And that's what you could claim to a prosecutor. Well, the prosecutor might disagree. He might say, that's not how I see it. I think you went out there with the intent of killing the guy that was stealing your Harley, and with no other witnesses and the bad guy, wounded or dead, you might find yourself up on charges. So stay inside the house, issue commands if you want, but make that call to 911 and be a good witness, and hopefully get that Harley returned to you very quickly.
Yep.
This just proves why these mental exercises are so important. We're going to call 911. We're going to make sure that we have a safe room. We got a plan. We're going to make sure that we go over these mental exercises, but don't forget to actually train and put it into practice. I think a lot of times we're just talking about it, but if we actually run through it, you're going to find holes. You're going to find where you need to make improvements, or you need to make changes that maybe you otherwise would not have even considered. I mean, Steve, we talk all the time about the importance of the after action report.
Yeah, it's important after you practice to sit down with your family and talk about what worked and what didn't work, and what didn't work, how can we resolve that issue? How can we improve it? How can we be better at it?
Yep.
So this leads me into the next topic, you guys, other considerations. So let's talk a little bit about how much to share with friends and coworkers on social media. Let's talk about the physical, legal, and financial and moral aspects to using force to defend your home. And I'm going to turn this over to Beth. And Beth, we're getting close to the end here, so let's be aware of that.
I can sum this up really quickly, guys. Please just note that the whole world doesn't need to know how many firearms, how much ammunition, or how much food or toilet paper you have. So while it's fun to share some memes and maybe some words of encouragement, please don't be giving away every single thing that you have in your stockpile or your storage. Just keep it to yourself.
Very good point. Beth, you told the story about the book 1 second after. That's a great example of good people moving to do irrational things because they're trying to protect the health of their family. So you don't want people to know that you've got things that can help them if they weren't well preparing. So I guess, Steve, I've got the last point here to talk about some of the moral and ethical and financial considerations of using force and just self-defense inside the home. So anyone who's attended one of our concealed carry and home defense classes knows that when we talk about the use of force outside the home, there's a lot of legal rules that we talk about and examples that we follow, but we can summarize it with a very easy statement. You should only use deadly force if you find yourself in a situation that you didn't start, you can't get out of, you can't escape from, and you have no other choice. That same kind of rule should be thought about inside the house, even though legally there's some nuances that allow, some differences on when force is allowable. But the bottom line situation is, if we end up using deadly force inside of our home, we should expect to be arrested and spend a lot of money to defend ourselves, of course, unless we're a member of the USCCA. So there are a few things that I like to use as examples here. Number one, if I can better protect myself and avoid using deadly crime by buying a couple 30-second screws, it's worth that investment. If I can go through a home inspection checklist and better prepare my house and make it less attractive to a criminal, that's a great investment. In fact, one analogy that I use when I teach these classes is I call the six-pack scenario. And I use this story especially for people who have a lot of bravado and think, well, I don't need to think about all those things. I've got my home defense shotgun or my home defense AR-15. I'll protect my house. So this scenario or this analogy goes like this. So let's say it's another mental exercise. It's the middle of the night. You hear the front door being kicked down, or you hear a basement window shattered. So instead of calling 911, well, I've got the right to defend my home. You grab your home defense shotgun, you sneak down the stairs stealthily, just like Beth was doing. You sneak down the stairs and you make your way into the basement, and all of a sudden you see a shadow against the basement window, and you see the flash of metal in this person's hand. So you fire one shot with your shotgun, thinking, I've just protected myself from a guy with a gun. You flip the lights on, and it's your 16-year-old neighbor who broke into your house to steal a six-pack of beer. Now, in some states, you might argue, well, I had the right to use deadly force because this person entered my home by stealth or by force. But I'd guarantee you'd lose money financially. You'd probably lose your job. You'd probably lose a lot of friends and family members that wouldn't talk to you anymore. So that analogy just helps people to understand everything's not clear cut when it comes to somebody coming inside the house, and having a safe room, like Beth has said, paying the money for those 30-cent screws. That can be ways that we avoid these situations in the first place.
Yeah, that's a great story, Michael. And to finish this up, you guys, what I want to do is thank everybody for being with us. It's been an incredibly informative and educational 60 minutes. But remember, this is only part one. We are so glad that everybody chose to join us. Our hope is that you take this information, share it with your loved ones and your friends, and begin planning, preparing, and practicing for your own home defense. We look forward to you joining us again next week for Building Your Home Defense Plan Part 2. Now, we're going to talk about things other than firearms. What we're talking about is what defensive tools should be included in that plan. We're also going to talk about the different options for home defense firearms. We'll talk a little bit about how does training for home defense differ from training for concealed carry in public. So I would like to remind all of you viewers one last time about these limited offers that we've been giving you today. They will run on until 5 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, and then we'll stay until supplies last. So these offers, for those of you who are not members yet, join now and you'll receive a Simply Safe home security system. The value of that is $363. You'll get that for free with your membership. So just go to the website or call in. Okay, the website is uscca.com/simplysafe, spelled SIMPLISAFE. So go to that website or call in, and then we'll run that offer again, you guys, for you all until 5 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, or until supplies are exhausted. Now, for those of you who are members, we also have a great deal on a number of Simply Safe home security systems for you. So just go to uscca.com and log in. That will take you to your member dashboard, and you'll find the link there that'll explain all the discounts that will be afforded to you. So once again, I'd like to thank all of you for watching tonight. Beth, I would like to thank you for bringing your knowledge and your experience to our audience. And Michael, always a pleasure to have the author of so many of our great resources join us live. Remember, everyone, this is part one of a two-part episode. So join us next Tuesday evening, April 14th at 7 p.m. Central Time for part 2. Don't forget to provide us your email if we don't already have it. We can always advertise the topics that we cover. Go to the uscca.com/stayinformed and enter your email on the bottom of this page. Have a great night.